Bien, muy buenas tardes, muy buenos días o buenas tardes a todos y todas, dependiendo de qué parte del mundo nos estén acompañando. Es para mí un honor poder inaugurar esta clase, masterclass de enseñanza interactiva en plataforma virtual. Mi nombre es Jimena Kalapsky, soy la jefa de reducción de la demanda de la Organización de Estados Americanos. Y en esta oportunidad me toca presentar a 3 destacados panelistas que van a darnos esta masterclass el día de hoy en relación al trabajo de enseñanza interactiva con el uso de plataformas virtuales. En esta ocasión nos va a acompañar la Universidad Peruana Cayetano Heredia junto con el Plan Colombo Chile. Este taller tiene como objetivo demostrar cuál es la mejor manera de facilitar la enseñanza interactiva en una plataforma virtual, utilizando algunos software de presentación y otras herramientas tecnológicas virtuales. Este taller va a girar en torno a un tema específico para académicos que imparten docencia en el área de reducción de la demanda de drogas. Voy a presentarles a nuestros 3 panelistas, al doctor Fernando Salazar Silva.
Fernando Salazar Silva. Most welcome, Fernando. He is a certified instructor in the Prevention Universal Program, as well as part of the implementation group. He's also part of the ICUDDR group, currently working there as of 2017. He has also been a member of the expert group in prevention for the United Nations and the Colombo plan. And he has brought forward the online specialization program for policies and school prevention. He has been part of the implementation group from the Norberto Gobbio Paraguayan group, and he has also worked in creating the curriculum for Universal UPC plan for the Intercontinental Paraguay University. Now I will also introduce Joe Rivas. Joe Rivas is an expert in e-learning EFL, also part of the plan of the Colombo plan implementation group, and she is also part of the train the trainer remote plans. Finally, I would like to welcome and introduce Azucena Avalos. She has a master's of science, and as of 2018 to date, she is the coordinator of the school prevention plan for psychoactive substances in Peru, and she has also carried out certain plans for in-person and remote learning activities. So welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for everyone joining today. I will be in the background listening and moderating in case there are any questions or comments or you would like me to enable your cameras and microphones. As a reminder, we do have a simultaneous interpretation feature available for everyone. And now I would like to pass the floor to Fernando Salazar to get this ball rolling. Thank you very much, Jimena. Let me just restate that it is an honor to have you as part of the moderator group. This is a memorable moment. It is amazing that the top person in CICAD is actually moderating our session. This doesn't happen every day, so let me just emphasize that. And also, I would like to just say that it is a pleasure to share this session with my colleagues, Azucena and Joe Rivas. Let me now share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. Let's talk about interactive learning on a virtual platform. And this session will be in charge of us 3, as Jimena introduced. And let me tell you a story about how this came to be. In 2018 and 2019, I had the pleasure of working with Azucena. Please raise your hand, Azucena. And we have been working for a long time in this university, dealing with students, parents, teachers, and it has been an amazing experience. In 2020, we had the bad luck of having our office closed pre pandemic. So we all went to our home and we were ready to work remotely, and we ended up being Zoom experts. From one moment to another, we were told that Zoom was not available anymore for us to use. And that's when we started to learn how to use other platforms. So we decided to bring the implementation of the prevention program remotely in different platforms and not only Zoom. So that was in itself an adventure. And in all the discussions of what to do and what not to do, we said, okay, what we can do is teach the prevention policies that can be done remotely, and especially the school environment. How do we create that? So that was a very interesting question to answer. Last year, we learned plenty about this, and that's where Joe Rivas comes in. Joe comes up, and all of the things that she knows how to do in the virtual space go well beyond my expertise of what I will ever know. So she helped us to become better instructors because we already had the content to do all of this in person, but not virtually. So last week, actually, taught us plenty. So this alliance, Peru, Chile, has been quite strong, and I hope we can help you also by means of our learning. Let me talk about the basic concepts of interactive learning. And for this purpose, let me just remind you all from for this specific concepts. So we were talking about this same topic in a previous master class, and ICUDDR is enabling this type of processes to move faster. But let's go back to the basic concepts of interactive learning. Let's go back to when you were around 4 years old. And you could maybe go knock on your neighbor's door with something that your mom or your dad told you to tell him or her. Your dad would tell you, okay, you go to Miss such and such house. When they open the door, you look at them in the eye and tell them that you need this. And then you wait for her or him to tell you yes or no. If that person tells you yes, you wait because maybe this person is going to give you a cup of sugar. Once you get the sugar, look at them again and don't only say thank you, you need to say thank you very, very much. Okay? After that, you say goodbye and you come back, okay? And your mom and your dad will say good job and they will give you a kiss, the forehead, and that's it. Now, in the next opportunity, you go to another neighbor's house and this happens. And in the fourth time that your parents tell you, go to the neighbor and you tell him this and that, you already know what they're going to tell you. You're like, okay, okay, I know what to say, I know what to do, I know what when to say. Okay, so that is a very common story of our childhood. And I'm sorry that I'm just saying this type of examples for only boys because I went to an only boys school. Those are the only references that I have. Mixed schools didn't exist at the time. So in schools, when we were going on our breaks, we liked to play football. And we had to organize a team before kicking the ball, and we had to do it quickly. And something that I remember very well is that the person that was the worst player was not picked. And I was usually that guy. So usually I ended up with whoever didn't have the team complete. So in this way, we have different ways of how to understand interactive learning. On the one side, how to communicate, and on the other side, how to make teamwork efficient, right? So what happened? How is it that with those things that we learned in our schools, now this is something that we need to teach our own students, right? How to do this? Well, perhaps some of the things that happen is that in previous generations, our parents were at home and they would just wait for us coming from school, and now parents have to go out and pick kids at school and stuff like that. Also, the competition between teams is something that now is changing towards collaboration. So these issues that are basic in our development are being lost. On the other side, we have education being assessed from teachers. You have to teach maths, language, science, and you have to do all of this in many different ways. So when we think about everything that we need to teach, we need to ask ourselves, how can I teach this in the most effective way on people that really doesn't know how to express themselves or that don't know how to be part of a team and work collaboratively in an effective way? So in the demand reduction area, we have noticed that when those emotional and social skills are not present, the prevalence of substance use grows and risk behaviors also increase. So we realize that we need to be smarter and we need to provide social and emotional skills first so that we can build positive contexts. And only in this type of contexts, kids will be able to learn what we teach them, including maths. So some people like to, for example, play even with numbers, and they make teams to play in numbers. So all of these things can be learned even with very specific subjects. So with all of this, we can understand and try to ask ourselves, what are these interactive education skills, which are part of the current education curriculums? So everything that has been taught by teachers is something that we need to also ask our students to practice. Everything related to interactive education has to do with effective communication. So that's what our parents taught us, to knock on our neighbor's door and be an effective communicator, or you need to make a team that actually worked better. It's part of effective education. And when this type of communication and collaborative work does not or is not enough, we need to know how to activate emotional and physical health or skills in our participants. Now that is also part of interactive education. And we cannot work on this in a specific place with that is not a safe space, where the environment or the context is not actually good for learning. So the environmental side of things is also very important. just as when we were told by our parents to clean our room, to make our bed, because otherwise we will not be able to go out. So we do all of that because the environment matters. So this type of interactive education skills also matter. Things that we learn at home and things that we learn in school is also something that needs to be taught in many different environments that now we are trying to incorporate, which include virtual environments as well. All of this will be a challenge that we will have to face later on. So having this in mind, what are the main components of this environment that needs to be created in our classrooms? Well, the first component of an environmental, of a specific context for the rooms would be rules and ground rules for the classroom, which include respect and being kind with others. This is an opportunity to express your emotions, and it also provides physical and emotional safety in classrooms. So we need to learn how to build this as well. A lot of people can say, well, these are the students that I got, and that's it. What can I do? I just got this very noisy group. So what can I do about that? Right? People might say that they are not there to fix the students, but just to teach them something. And some people think this is impossible. However, there are many ways and many tools we can use in order to actually build a favorable learning environment. What can we do? So, number one, we need to establish ground rules and promote motivation. And there is a very simple exercise that we can implement from the very beginning, which is what do you expect from this? So, if you expect this from the course or from this group, what are your commitments to reach that expectation? What are you going to contribute so that those expectations actually are met? So, in order to achieve that, we need to establish some ground rules. And these are basically the rules of the game. Sometimes we only establish the rules, but we don't move into the commitments or the expectations of our students. So this actually includes our teachers. What do I expect from this group? So on the one side, let's say the very basic thing, to start on time. And what do I have to do for a class to start on time? I need to plan and I need to be there. So sometimes what is happening is that if I am a university professor, you connect to the virtual classroom. Everyone is there. Your cameras are off. Your audio is off, apparently. We don't even know if they're listening to us. And this is something that we actually need to try to improve. Sometimes they are there, but they're not really paying attention. So, this type of expectation and commitments from the group and from the teachers are very important. Now, moving on to interactive communication, we need to include active listening. And how do I do that? How do I actively listen to my students? Currently, you're listening to my voice. I am trying to look at you on my screen, trying to make at least some sort of visual contact. I am here in my heart and soul and body because I am prepared to be here. I have prepared myself reading what I need to read. I like to be here in order to listen to what you say and try to understand what you will ask so that I can answer with a specific purpose. And the purpose is to build on the conversation that we have started and to create motivation around the specific issues. When I ask you something, I cannot just ask questions quickly. I need to start learning how to wait those famous 3 seconds after providing an answer. This is something really important so that people can understand, for example, in the virtual environment, where they need to click to activate their microphones, right? So it's not only about waiting 3 seconds for the question to sink in, but also to wait for them to know how to use the tool so that they can answer. Because if I just ask questions one after the other, that might be a little overwhelming for a lot of people. We also need to learn how to ask open-ended questions. These open-ended questions are the ones that are not only a yes or no, but they require elaboration. So, do you like me? Yes, no. That would be a closed-ended question, but an open-ended question would be why? Why do you like this or why do you like that? So we need to practice what are these type of questions that we need to incorporate in our classes. Likewise, we should not only ask for the sake of asking questions. We need to ask questions for a specific purpose. I ask questions because I want to learn more from you. And I answer because I want you to know more about me or about this specific thing. So in this way, interactive communication actually becomes part of the effective communication, not only communicating with the ears, with the eyes, with our hearts. So what else can we do? Well, we can promote collaborative teamwork. So sometimes we have learned actually how to do breakout rooms, right? So these breakout rooms are very interesting because this allows for other type of exercises. But before doing that in those breakout rooms, both in person and virtually, we need to establish some ground rules as well. So for example, we will speak only for a minute. We can raise our hands physically or virtually, and hopefully everyone will be willing to participate. And when we have small groups, we can ask everyone to turn on their camera so that we can actually see that people are there. Of course, important to mute the audio of everyone so that we can actually understand what people are saying, right? That's another important point. Roles need to be established. Who will moderate? Who will open the microphones? What will be the result of this session? So that person, the moderator, needs to establish who will be the timekeeper, who will be taking notes, who will be answering some questions. So all of these are very different roles that in the virtual environment need to be incorporated into our lessons. In the specific point of activation, we need to group and regroup our participants to keep them focused. So for example, I can say, everyone listening will have to breathe in the specific rhythm that I will tell you. So if you'd like to turn on your cameras, we can do this exercise together. Okay, I can see some of you. Okay, you will breathe in. I will count from 1 to 8. And I will be counting with my fingers so that I can actually do the exercise as well.
Ok, ya. Ahora, vamos a aspirar hasta 8 y después
okay. So we breathe in 8 seconds and we breathe out in 6. So let's start again.
Y así podríamos jugar con esto un buen rato más.
And we can play with this type of exercises, and the effect is that we will all sink in. These are techniques that we have been using in person for so many years and can also be used for the virtual environment. So for example, Javier, you said that your camera was going to be off, but you turned it on now. So that's great. It's really nice to see you all. So that's what I mean when we activate the group. And the last point, it says practice of skills, of participant skills. That has to do with asking open-ended questions. Everything that I talked about, questions need to be practiced as well. And why do we do this in practice? Well, there is something called the retention pyramid. If you read something and you just read completely directly like that, people will not necessarily remember what you said. But if you go back and ask questions about what you just read, there is a greater chance that people will recognize what you read, pay attention, and remember. So that's what we mean when we talk about interactive learning. And why should we use this type of interactive education techniques in drug prevention? Well, international standards state that this type of interventions that are directed towards teenagers and children have positive effects when they are delivered with interactive education techniques. There is scientific evidence behind this. That's why I read this completely. This type of preventive interactions or interventions, when they are delivered in this type of interactive education techniques, are actually more effective. Something that is also very well studied is that interactive learning is effective when we develop social and emotional skills, and it contributes to a positive environment in the classroom. We all know the power of positive environment construction in a classroom. When we have a positive environment in a school, that facilitates the rest of the learning process as well as retention. And it also diminishes the probability of participants to go into risk activities. Another point coming from international standards and quality control is that a condition is for implementators, they need to be trained for the development of interactive education skills. We need to train them because these tools work best when they are applied together, not isolated ways. So, what are the challenges that we are currently facing? Currently, children and teenagers are not going to school. They are learning at home in front of their computers. And if we recall, those international standards were created with in-person education in mind. All of those components now need to be translated into the virtual environment. That is a big challenge. This photo, the bottom left, we see a huge screen that has some features that the kids on the upper left don't have available. So there is a great deal of inequality in terms of access to these different tools for education. There is, however, another problem. During the pandemic, a lot of families migrated from the cities to rural environments. And those kids from the city have, some of them, more education in terms of how to use computers, tablets, smartphones, and other kind of devices, and even a little bit more knowledge than their teachers. So how do we use this type of conditions so that we know how to teach students? Why do we have to worry about this type of inequality? Well, because we need to remember that the definition of this type of education has to do with the development of human education. And that is why it is very, very important to emphasize this specific point. Okay, so with this in mind, that I hope I was able to explain clearly, I will now pass the floor to Joe, who has the challenge of implementing everything I just said. So Joe, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Fernando. Are you able to listen to my microphone? Yep. Okay, so let me emphasize those final points that Fernando just mentioned related to the challenges. I believe we all have the same challenges at the very beginning of the pandemic, but I think that the main ones for any professional that suddenly becomes a teacher, because that is a very common situation in adult education, specifically in the area that I work for, is the creation of new applications. This is this is a very accelerated process from the very beginning of the pandemic.
So we're facing a situation which is a very challenging one and a permanent one too, because we were already comfortable with one tool and we realized that every time we had to install a new application or a new update because apps keep on changing, or we were very comfortably using one app and then one of our colleagues said, oh, have you heard of this new app? And this is better than the one you're using so far. So this has been a continuous challenge of learning and relearning the use of new updates and new apps. Without going too far, there is a very interesting data stating that since the beginning of January 2020, there were 27,000 downloads of Google Classroom. That was January 2020. And in March, once the pandemic started, there were 1 million downloads from 27,000 to 1 million just because of the pandemic. The same applies to Zoom. Zoom had a monthly download in 2019 of 11,000. That means every month, 11 times was Zoom downloaded. That was 2019. In 2020, it was 1 million. Sorry, I do not know whether it's 2020, 2021 because of the pandemic, but we're talking about April 2020. That was the peak of Zoom downloads, which was 1,300,000 per month. So this shows us that the pandemic has accelerated the use of technology, and which comes as a challenge, a permanent challenge for people who are working in education, because this implies the need for technological support, which we do not always have. I have been a teacher of technology for many years, and I always face the same situation. We do not have technological support in school. I do not have anyone helping me. If it's not my oldest child who knows a bit more than I do, there's no one else to support me. So it is important to work with user-friendly apps because this comes as an additional factor of stress. So there are many free apps that are amazing, and then when you go into the application, there are only two options, and then if you want to use the full version, then you have to pay. So you have to also assess what kind of application you're going to use and if you're willing to pay and whether this is convenient or not. As a teacher, one has to be aware of the fact one has to be aware that you have to keep an eye contact with your students, because there were students who were highly committed to the course, and you cannot always ask each one of them to have their cameras on because some of them didn't have the broadband for that, so they had to keep on disconnecting. Also, sometimes there was no electricity that day and the students couldn't connect. So last year we had electric storms and like thunderstorms, and many students didn't have just a proper connection. And also the high exposure to screens. This is something we have to take into account because students are suffering because of that, and of course teachers too. Reduced times, we have to consider that people do not have the same time, the same amount of time as they did before in order to read books or carry out homeworks, because the fact of being online all the time has taken away personal free time. So we have to take into account the reduction in free time, and this is one of the challenges we have to consider when planning. And all this is only in order to have highly motivated and participatory students. Um, so these are some technologies that we have been implementing since last year. We have been using an emergency remote modality. So what did we come up with? Well, taking into account everything we just mentioned, well, we worked with this flipped classroom method, which we thought was the most highly adapted to our needs, where we had synchronic decisions to asynchronic decisions and so on. So the resource review was asynchronic. That was before the students took part in a real-time session in which they had to carry out some homeworks and read some things that the teacher would suggest, and for them to focus on what we needed for them to focus on during the real-time encounters. They had to check videos, infographics, and documentaries and films. So this took 40% of the time of the course. And synchronic sessions, that means real-time meetings or gatherings online, that is 60% of the time of the courses. We carried out small group activities, individual reflections, role playing, and also debates. This is very much linked to what Fernando was saying, in order to capture the attention, commitment, and the motivation of the students. There are many things within this technology of inverted room or classroom. A flipped classroom, sorry. So how do we manage this commitment? How do we manage to organize the class for this small group exercises if they are not seeing each other? So that was one of the first challenges. And also the videos. I mean, how can we find such specific videos for prevention, for treatment? Where can we find all these videos? Well, there are many actually, but it implies editing and maybe asking them to check out a certain section of the video. Some of them do not have access to those videos or to the proper broadband. Uh, so bandwidth. So yeah, this was a bit hard. So, and some people, for instance, we asked them to film some videos, and some people are really scared of being filmed. Or some people have no idea on how to make a video. So all these things were obstacles. For instance, you can transform as just a PowerPoint into a video. You just have to go to the option record, and many teachers do not even know this exists. So you have to create an animation, control the times of the animations in the slides for them not to be too quick in the video, and then you just save it as MP4 or MP3 if you want to create an audio. So there are very simple ways of creating your own videos, but I think the easiest thing is to use Meet or Zoom. You just open a session as if you were in a meeting or as if you were alone, and you just show your presentation and you record the session. Then you can save it in a format which is a bit heavy, but it is also, there are other tools in order to make these videos lighter. For instance, you can send it via WhatsApp and they're compressed. This is homemade stuff. So if you want to reduce the size of a video and you do not know how to do it, you do not have a video editor, you just send it via WhatsApp to any of your contacts and the video is automatically compressed and it is way lighter for you to share it. And in order to promote collaborative work is the thing I'm going to show you right now. Well, before that, the structure of our classes, well, we have sessions of 120 minutes. We start with a reading quiz. So this quiz is to verify whether the participant watched the video or read the book or the pages or the information we suggested for them to read. And like that, we can see the level of comprehension of the contents we assigned. Then we, of course, check the quiz. We see the goals of the session. We have a very short plenary session in which the instructor lays out the contents of the class. Then we have interactive activities. We use Padlet or any other tool that we decide at the moment with the instructor. Then we have another plenary session where we come to the conclusions of that activity. Then we have another interaction activity that for the instructions of the following sessions, and so on and so forth. And then we move on to an synchronous activity, and then to a synchronous one, and so on. And then we have a satisfaction survey in order to improve our classes. You can see on the right the minutes every section lasts. But as you can see, interactive activities take the most of the time, not even the plenary, because we just take very quick comments and remarks during the plenary, but then the important thing is to focus on interactive activities. And all of the challenges we were saying we can have, for instance, connection problems and stuff, this methodology is really useful in order to solve all these problems. The tools we used were Zoom for our synchronous sessions. So back then, when we started working during the pandemic, Zoom had was the only system that offered the option of breakout groups. Then Meets also had it, but it was more complex. For quizzes and satisfaction surveys, we use Socrative, which is something very similar to Kahoot that many of you know, or Mentimeter. But we used Socrative because it allows you to download all of the information of quizzes, surveys, and all of the activities you have carried out as graphs or as Excel sheets. When we come to the end of a course, we take the information and we look at each one of the sessions for each one of the groups, and we have a look at the most effective sessions, and that allows us to define what's next. Padlet is something we use to track collaborative activities. I'm going to show it in detail in a few minutes. Google Classroom is a repository of information. When we were talking about the connectivity problems or unstable connections, well, we couldn't upload, for instance, the video of our sessions to Google Classroom in order to look at it. If someone went to the session and would like to review the contents, maybe there was something that was not quite clear, the students will always have all the materials and all the sessions in Google Classroom. And this repository also helped us to organize information, to organize it by modules, by sessions, and all of the resources were available there. And people knew that in Google Classroom they would find everything. We also use Google Forms for diagnose um, assessments and for other resources, and we use WhatsApp as a means of communication. And this has been very effective because the WhatsApp groups generate support and collaboration networks that are very strong. We had a course that started in October, and these people are still on WhatsApp and they're very active. And all these professionals are sharing information, and they're also sharing the studies. They're following all the seminars they do, or simply just data. If I need a specialist on this in this area, what can you recommend? Or I need this or that. So it is beautiful to see that these networks are sustained in time. Padlet is what is going to take most of the time today because it has been very effective, and this has been of great help to our collaboration, and we have different formats. We have the wall, muro, which is called like that because it looks like brick wall and you paste a sort of like a post-it, like an online post-it, and you can just add text, you can change the format, you can use bold, italic, or you can also incorporate audio, video, images. There are many professors that use Padlet for their podcasts. So they just share the link of Padlet with the audio, with the different activities, and some teachers just share this link and the students can follow. The list is like a blog. So you scroll down and you see the different posts is very similar to a post. And this is really interesting in order to keep knowledge journals or diaries. You can keep some sort of record. Sorry, I missed the word, but I wanted to say a portfolio or like a record where the students can keep what they learned day by day. And at the end, keeping a summary or a synthesis of what they learned is of great help. Then we also have a board where which like the looks similar to the wall, which could be a bit messy sometimes. So the orange option is a board and it's a bit more orderly. Then we have the columns. For instance, when we separate the classes by groups, so we can use the first column for instructions, then room 1, third column could be room 2, etc. And each one of the groups follows the instructions according to their column. For instance, about the roles each one of the groups are going to play, and there must be one person who controls time, a group leader that moderates the conversation, and not just allowing everyone to talk at the same time, which is one of the difficulties of working online because there's someone who wants to dominate the conversation. So this helps you to keep some sort of order. We have the format of map. We haven't used it, but I have explored it a bit. And well, this you can focus on different geographic areas and you can just zoom in to images or videos or text for specific geographical points. And the canvas is something really interesting because it allows you to distribute and group and connect content as you want. It's just very free, and this is very useful. And the timeline or chronology, which is you can work with processes, with timelines, and you can combine image, video, text, and everything you want. So this is what it would look like. This is what the wall looks like. Then the canvas, where you just establish connections between images and concepts and all these things. Then the columns, you see there is a title for each one of them that allows you to organize the information. Then you have a list, like a blog. Then the board with a beautifully laid process, the timeline or chronology, and then the map pointing at a specific city. This is an example of the wall, which we always use for the introduction and the expectations of the participants before starting a course. We send them a link of the to Padlet. They can enter their LinkedIn, their blog, or just a photo with their own description, and then the rest of people can comment and add hearts and likes and whatever is necessary for the participants to introduce themselves at the beginning of each activity. I was looking at the time I have left. So we see some other for instance, in the columns, we have the instructions in the first column. We have some guiding questions for the activity to be guided. And then we have each one of the rooms as we divide the class. The board is something we have used for virtual ceremonies. We give away the diplomas virtually, so each one of the participants can click on their certificate and download it immediately as the session ends. And this is a canvas where we establish the connection between different concepts. And we also use the canvas in order to, we use the human figure for understanding the effects of marijuana. And and then you can connect these different concepts to the human figure, etc. Another example is the canvas. Another example where we use the canvas is where you drag the concepts towards a definition. Here we had a collaborative work. Who could imagine that you could make a puzzle online with people from across the world? So this is what we did, and this is what it looked like. So we used the canvas also for creating this puzzle, and this is how they showed us how to work in teams. Some tips in order to create multimedia resources. First of all, have fun, enjoy. Start by something easy and known. As I was saying, no one is an expert in making videos, so just record yourself giving a Zoom presentation or transform your PowerPoint into a video. When you're recording video capsules, but just relax and be yourself. Don't pretend to be anyone else because students are going to notice if you're trying hard, and that's not good. So just relax because everyone's going to notice. And if you are yourself, students are going to perceive that too. Another point is focus on what is important. How? Well, let them take notes, write a summary, or complete a questionnaire. Those are good options. They can also come up with reflective questions on a specific topic. So you can actually prompt questions from them in order to trigger discussion. There are a series of techniques that you can use in order to focus on whatever you want to rescue from each one of the groups. And of course, maintain students actively motivated. And well, for that, I am going to leave you with Azucena, who is an expert in energy boosts and motivation and all these kinds of activities in order to keep up the motivation of a group. I prepared a list of resources, multimedia resources, their benefits, their pros and cons, and where to find them, whether you have to pay or whether it's free. And this is something we're going to share in the link that I'm just pasting in the chat. There are other videos in order to use Padlet, how to register, and how to divide a course into rooms. There is a series of instructions, and you can also use Socratic because we do not, I didn't stop to explain how to use it because we do not have time, but I am going to leave all these resources with in the chat right now. And I'll leave you with Azucena. Well, thank you, Jo. Thank you for passing the floor. We're actually doing quite well in terms of time, so I think we're very well organized as a team. As a matter of fact, I am going to share with you what Jo said, these energizers, and I also want to let you know that energizers in the context of the pandemic have been proven both with teenagers and adults, also with professionals, with colleagues, and actually these have been of great help, and this is why we want to share that with you. So maybe you have heard once and again the word energizer, but maybe in your countries this has other names. Maybe you call them activators, invigorizers, energy boosts, physical, emotional activation, or active pause. So what I'm going to share with you today relates also to what Fernando said and also what Joe said. That is, you have to put a lot of emotion, a lot of heart into these tools, because there is scientific evidence that this has a potential effect in the process of learning of people, whether we're talking about children, teenagers, or adults. And I hope to be able to show you the core of what we call energizers or activators. So I am going to share my screen. So you can see on this slide that I have added a tool next to the abilities for interactive teaching. And these abilities for interactive teaching are something that lies on very firm scientific grounds. And there is scientific proof that this has an influence in the learning process. So we add this tool that is called Energizer, and this contributes for the environment, for the entourage in the class, has an actual impact in the process of learning of students. So let's have a look at this Energizer. Let's consider it a tool of great help, a tool that we're going to analyze in a few minutes. And we're also going to learn what the right moment is to use the energizers, what kind of populations we can use them with. What do I want to achieve? What is my goal? What do I want to, to reach? Whether I'm working with students, with university students, with colleagues, with professional people. So what do I want to achieve? What do I want to boost? What do I want to promote with these energizers? So the energizers are tools and resources that we have to take care of and we have to know when to use. The main features of the energizers, in addition to being uh, educational, are very interesting, and you should not overuse them. There are some myths and beliefs that say that energizers are just for playing or for having fun, but I will actually tell you that they are not necessarily only for playing in class. So this image I am showing on screen, you have a green circle reading energizers or whatever you want to call them, active pause, physical emotional activity, is next to an image. I mean, as a Peruvian, as Peruvians, we will always talk about our delicious cuisine. So of course, I didn't hesitate before adding an image of what the ingredients are of Peruvian gastronomy. Do not answer, but just imagine what the process of cooking is. What does it look like when you come into the kitchen and you start cooking something, especially when you want to cook something for someone you love, for people for whom we care? What should we have at hand? What do we need? What should be there next to us? Well, as a matter of fact, as you can see on the image, we need tools. We need maybe recipes that are going to tell us the ABC of the process we have to follow. They are going to tell us the amounts, what goes first, what goes next. We're going to read not only the ingredients, but also the procedures. And something that is very important, you see two people who, with, with care, with passion, with knowledge, are presenting and offering these plates. Well, I added this image in order to play a little bit with what an energizer means. An energizer has also a procedure. There is a content. We have to know to whom this is geared and what we want to promote in the population, what kind of structure, the time, the methodology, how I'm going to deploy this activity, and how I am going to deliver this, what the implementation is, and who are the people.
No está pasando tu diapositiva.
Your slide cannot be seen. No, I am actually still in the image of cooking. Sorry, do not. I'm still on the screen, on the slide you can see on the screen. Don't worry. I'm just elaborating on the image. So it is important to understand how important it is for people to implement their energizers, having practiced them in advance. So if you're going to try one of these energizers, you need to know how they work, and people have to be trained. People have to know the the foundations and the origins of these energizers and how they work in order to apply them. This is why I was saying, well, should share this image in order to show you that, as a matter of fact, energizers have foundations, they have a structure for being implemented.
And precisely, this is the structure that all of the evidence-based programs show. And for example, we can define whether we are going to implement this for kids, for teenagers, university students, or adults. What are we looking for in this kind of energizing activities? Because there are some of these activities that we have been able to successfully adapt to the virtual world, and there are some others that have some specific conditions to actually be effective. So if we have one session where people are meeting for the first time, then we have to incorporate an energizing activity that allows people to introduce themselves. For example, what type of skills or what type of interests they have, or we would like to make public or tell about to the group. So this structure should have a specific time in order to implement it effectively. And as I was saying, we need to practice them. Actually, I would like to encourage you to practice these energizing activities between colleagues or family or even your children, because they have a very interesting impact in the overall mood of people. And it's very, very effective in breaking the ice of sessions, especially remote sessions, because we are working with people, and that is an important part of an effective session. Now, this is another image that I would like to show you because it explains how these energizing activities contribute to the micro environment of the classroom so that people are able to correctly develop their learning interactions. This is very well explained in the UPC manuals. And this is very interesting because, for example, I have here the image of a thermometer. And this thermometer will serve as a reflection tool in terms of when should this energizing activity should be implemented and when. So I was saying that in the first day of school, we could start with some energizing activities that have a low risk level because we are not familiar with each other. Perhaps on the first day of school, we're trying to see Where are people coming from? What do they do? Why are they here? So let's say as an example, we have some energizing activities that ask people to say what kind of artist would they like to be, or what historical stage in history would they like to have lived, or what kind of book would they be, or something like that. This allows us to know in very general terms people's interests. So we are not really going deep with some aspects of people where they can feel perhaps that their privacy is being violated or something like that. We're just talking about what was the last book you read, or what type of music do you like, or what kind of physical activity do you like to participate in. So this type of spaces allow for this type of interaction and communication. We have tested this and we have proven that when a group of teenagers start talking about their own interests, allows for them to share more specific issues so that some connections start building. Especially in remote settings, they can start connecting through WhatsApp or other device or other tools, but with a specific purpose of sharing those common interests. So there are some really interesting efforts that the pandemic has placed in front of us, because these energizing activities work very well in person, but now in the virtuality of the classroom, it's different. But we still believe that they are very, very implementable. They can be used effectively. However, previous practice is important for those of you who might be willing to use them. These are some good questions that we can ask at the end of each energizing activity. So every time there is an interaction between the group, it is important to ask the group, what happened here? First, ask what? What happened here? And we can learn from the chat that people will say that, well, we broke the ice, we started to interact, we asked each other some questions around our personal interests, etc. The next question would be, what does this mean to you? What were the emotions that were um, awakened by this? Some people say that they laughed out loud, or they realized that no one ever asked them this in the first class, or that they feel comfortable. And the last question is, how can I implement this? So, can you do this? Can you implement this? So, basically, it's open space for action. So that they can reflect this and put it into practice in their pedagogical spaces. Specifically, that currently teachers have this unending work days. And just to tell you a story about that, I was invited to a working day that teachers were participating, and we were implementing these energizing activities every so often. But we realized that it had the active pause concept. And this concept, this active pause concept, was very different to what I'm telling you now. Their active pause was kind of like the break, right? Go get a coffee, stretch, come back. And that is not what we talk about when we're talking about energizing activity. We're talking about interactive spaces that allow for people to interact among themselves, between themselves, so that they can start sharing, depending on the levels of trust of the group, some skills, some interests or some specific issues. So these three questions are fundamental as part of the structure of energizing activities. And I believe this is my last slide here. We will now really land those activities into practice. Yes, these are gamified activities that can be used in the virtual environment, and we need to know when to pull them out from the toolbox. This implementation is intermittent. We should be careful in not overuse them so that people might be extremely energized, and this might just disorient the course of the group. Also, we need to take into account the temperature, if you will, of the place. So depending on the temperature of the room, we will decide what kind of energizing activity will be used. So if this activity will allow for the group to get to know each other better, that's the one that we need to use. So it is important to know the audience. Know your audience first. And a lot of the people that are here currently perhaps teach at university levels or in different types of schools, right? So when we have this type of schools, we have some records and lists. It is important to ask a little bit more of the group's characteristics to have a full idea of what kind of group are we going to talk to, and go back to that list to know what is the ages, the average age, what is the main professions that these people have, and this will allow us to find a specific energizing activity that will work for the group. We need to be careful though. We are working with people that we want them to work in a specific setting that promotes learning. We also need to use these opportunities progressively and learn how to run risks, but always with a safe environment in mind. It is very important to have a training of the person that will be implementing the energizing activities so that they can control any situation that might get out of hand. So sometimes we might be working with teenagers or young people. We might minimize mockery or jokes or things that might derail the class. Also promote interaction between partners, and this also allows us to include everyone as part of the activity. Everyone should be part of it, ideally, right? So an ideal group could be perhaps 20, 23 people approximately, so that we can actually have an effective interaction, specifically in the remote environment. And I would like to end with this slide, because it is important to say that when we go into a virtual class, we can go with a specific mindset, a preparation. So Fernando was referring to the heart, the soul, and life, which is a common phrase in Peru. And this is a way of approaching our work in order to understand what is the possibility of implementing all of these activities in our remote classes, because remote classes already constitute a very big effort to carry out effectively. So thank you very much for listening, and these are all my points.
Ok. Tenemos unos minutos para...
Great. We do have some minutes for questions. So let's start warming up for those questions and answers. So some of the things that we just heard is that in-person classes couldn't go beyond 45 minutes, remember? And this is because people usually cannot be more than 45 minutes fully concentrated. It's quite hard to do that, actually. And people need to go to the bathroom or do things like that. And in these virtual spaces, sometimes we have actually forgot about that. So when someone needs to go to the bathroom, they turn off their camera, turn off their mic, and they leave quietly. I think that that is not the idea here. I think we should actually plan for that. So as part of the ground rules of those commitments that we are trying to establish from the very beginning, we need to tell the group that they can bring their coffee, that we will have a specific space to go to the bathroom and things like that, so that everyone feels included. Another specific point that I would like to say, which it might be a teachable moment here, is that we can actually do an exercise right now. If you'd like to do it, you can do it. Normally, I ask people to rename themselves with the name that they like people to call them. So my name is Fernando Salazar, but my friends call me Fer, right? So with Fer, I feel more comfortable with the name Fer. I feel like I'm among friends. So we can start talking with this kind of familiarity when people rename themselves in this way. And basically, what we need to do is try to hook people into our discourse. So what I did at the beginning of this talk, in order to hook you, hopefully, I try to bring you back to your childhood, right? So when we start thinking about that, people start thinking of their own childhood and experiences. So everything has a reason in interactive education. These are not just games. These activities have a purpose. So, for example, Kahoot can be very fun, right? However, I actually made a mistake in using Kahoot. This is a real life story. So I was playing with all of these topics, and some of undergraduate students, we were teaching them with some Kahoot activity to start the class. So the classes were on Monday, and the prior day we had the presidential election, and two candidates were even in the votes, and we had a very difficult situation in the country. So the next day, when I asked them to rename themselves, to change their name to the name, they added the name of the two candidates, which basically became a problem. So we had to cancel the Kahoot activity because I thought this could actually derail our conversation. So it is an art to know how to use these tools. So how can we achieve this type of complicities with your colleagues that are next to you? I think Javier wrote on the chat that they use WhatsApp. So in WhatsApp, you can create groups, right? And in WhatsApp, you have personal communication. And sometimes you need to be careful because sometimes you say things and send it to the wrong chat or to send it to a person, right? So this kind of mishaps happen quite often. So we need to be careful with this. When people find themselves in a correct environment, this allows for a social and emotional teaching moments. And when we ensure that this is the case, we get also a good feedback from them. So all of the prevention basically is based on the specific issues. Everything related to the desired behaviors are based on positive environments, positive learning environments. But let's not forget of how to generate those behaviors, which is the environmental aspect of it all. What are we going to do to take care of our virtual environment? And Joe has presented some really, really good experiences. We are currently coming into the second year of this virtual space, so we will get more used to this, and the applications will evolve as well for this purpose. So as Azucena said as well today, the interactive education techniques are not only games per se, there is a scientific basis as to why they work. There is an exercise that I also tend to do in this type of spaces to activate people. And I'll try to do it now. So I'd like to ask you to turn on your cameras, if you will. So everyone who cannot turn your cameras on, just check out what we're doing. So I would like to ask everyone with the cameras on. Let's try to see who can touch your ears with the ends of your lips with no help of your hands, Joe. No help of your hands, Graciela. Okay. So Judith and Javier immediately laughed. And this has a physiological basis. So when one activates laughs, the other person can activate others. So why not smile to each other, right? Like this is part of it. So I never knew that, for example, Joe was called Jojita. So this is something really interesting when you get to know people. So we have a colleague that is called Inez, but if I call her Inez in the group, she might not respond because she's used to being called Inesita. Okay, so I leave my comments there, and I would like now to open the. I like to open the floor for people to speak. Okay, let's now try to touch our ears with the end of our lips. Let's see if that works. Okay, so the mic is open now. The floor is open for questions and comments. There's something that I did not say, and I forgot to say that. So now, based on different times and time frames, we can transform things by making a video. A 45-minute class can be summarized in 10 minutes or even less. So when you plan classes for videos, you can consider that. How much time are you going to save by using videos for people to watch that and then come into the class already activated with the knowledge? And in the class, you can just reinforce. So the use of videos is extremely effective. And it could be even less than 10 minutes. So the most advisable thing to do is to have like 5-minute short videos so that we can activate knowledge with our groups. Thank you very much, Ajita. Hello, can I ask a question? Of course, Graciela. Okay, hello everyone from Asunción, Paraguay. Thank you very much, Fer, Joe, and Azucena. Azucena and I still need to go to Lima, Peru. That's a pending thing that we have in our agendas. So thank you very much for this information. I believe that this was a very interesting contribution to everything that we have to learn how to do, jumping into virtuality. So I would like to comment something, but I would love to hear your comments. So Joe, when we talk about new technologies, there is a level of stress and difficulty by trying to do this. And I say it because that happened to me, right? Like, okay, so using Padlet or using this other tool, and when you don't know or you're not familiar with these tools, that creates stress. And how do we deal with that, right? So we need to learn how to do it. So the facilitator needs to be open to learn the use of new technologies and try not to get stressed about, as Fer was saying, to actually deliver in body and soul what they're trying to do. So how do we take care of providing good quality products, considering that we might not be experts in the tools? And Azucena, what you were saying, I agree with the fact that we need to be very timely with our energizing activities. So, in your experience, I'd love to hear what are some of timely energizing activities when the population that you have in front of you, it's a little more complex in a way, complex to understand. So we have sometimes groups of professors that are not really, let's say, understanding. We're not getting through to them. So how can we strengthen that situation or solve that situation with some timely energizing activity? And also, thank you very much. And I'd like to send my regards to everyone from Paraguay. We are right now at 4 degrees Celsius. So we're very cold down here. So just wanted to ask you these questions and thank you very much for your comments. Okay, thank you very much, Graciela. So both Fernando and Azucena have repeated this in their presentations as well. So working with evidence-based methods is critical so that we can actually know that it's going to work. So the sessions that we work on are quite delicate sometimes in nature, and sometimes those debates can get derailed in a way. So I believe that the fundamental piece when we are trying to establish the ground rules of the game or the activities, we need to ask of our participants that all of the comments need to be evidence-based, right? Because many people might have their own opinions in many things related to prevention. So if we're going to talk about drug prevention, we need to emphasize the need of evidence-based comments. And in terms of the technology, as I was saying in the beginning, it might be very stressful. That is very true. Because, and I showed you very few tools here, because if I showed you all of the ones that I know exist, you will be absolutely overwhelmed with all of the information. So we need to start from the very simple. We need to understand that we should not ask of ourselves more than we can give to those tools. So we will be able to learn in general how these tools are used, but little by little, we need to feel comfortable in using those tools first so that those don't generate an extra layer of stress. I don't know if that works for you, Graciela. I think she got disconnected for a minute. So I hope that this was also quite useful for everyone else. Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. That was very clear. Perhaps, Azucena, could you like to address that comment? Well, Graciela got disconnected, unfortunately, but I feel like the question was very interesting and very timely as well, because these energizing activities, depending on the population that we're dealing with, sometimes we need to use those energizing activities depending from different toolboxes, right? So we need to understand what is the general mood of people to know if we are going to use this specific energizing activity in this class, or if this would be most or better suited for the second or third class. So we need to also read the room before we actually implement the activity. So we see Graciela that she's back. So Graciela, I was just answering your question and your comment. So we actually have a list of energizing activities that we can do in virtual events. Great, thank you very much. Now I will be the bad guy of this movie because we have just a few seconds left. And I don't know, Jimena, if you'd like to just wrap up the session for today. And I'm sorry that we went over time for a little bit. No, don't worry. Thank you very much. This was a very, very interesting session. I want to thank Joe, Fernando, and Azucena, and everyone that has been in this session. I can see that you're all smiling a lot. So I hope that this session has been interesting to all of you. We have learned so many practical tools out of this session, and I hope that we can continue to exchange this type of tools because we live in a very challenging moment right now, and trying to add this type of sessions will alleviate stress to us all. And we have a lot of accumulated experience in all of you. You have been working from the very beginning of the pandemic in order to adapt training sessions. So we are all living with a very big toolbox to draw from, to apply in our training sessions and also in our own meetings. Because we don't want to go back to that old system where our meetings are just never ending. So it's good to have ground rules, to have specific tools, time frames, and mindsets to apply during this new normal in a way. And this, I believe, will continue to be the case after the pandemic. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to everyone that joined today's session. And we invite you to the next activities that we have tomorrow in this ICUDDR conference. Have a great rest of your day and good night to those who are on the other side of the globe. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Gracias, chao, chao.
Chao.
Gracias a ustedes, gracias, profesor.
Gracias, gracias.
Buenas noches. Good evening.
Javier, gusto de verte
Buenas
siempre.
noches.
Chao, chao. Qué bueno que estés.
Chao, Fernando, que estés muy bien.
Chao, chao, Joquita. Chao, chao.
Chao, Joquita.
Cojita.